Hello and welcome back, everyone. Happy Thursday. Big loud car outside for the big nice. Today we're going to be doing a rundown of Dev Diary 111, which is going to be detailing subject improvements in the upcoming Sphere of Influence DLC, the first major DLC for Victoria 3, which released on May 6th. And not only are we going to be doing that, but we have a victory here. A moral victory. For the devs have wished us a happy Thursday as well. Alright, happy Thursday, everyone. It's time for more Sphere of Influence Update 1.7 news. One of the many benefits of being a Victorian-era great power other than dysentery is that you might be able to lord over not just your own people, but other nations as well. Whether acquired through brutal conquest, colonial mechanisms, or willing subserviency, countries subjugated under your leadership can provide benefit for your empires in a number of ways. One, they expand your market. They provide you with a share of prestige. They may compensate you with taxes in exchange for your protection. They may join your wars, etc. And you know what? It's mostly etc. That doesn't mean subjects the etc. is we annex them and we take their dirt. This doesn't mean that subjects will just always lie back and accept you exploiting them. Overlords that can see their subjects as nothing but buffer zones and cash cows could in time come to learn patience can run thin, leading to calls for independence. Really think that this is going to be a super fun mechanic if they make it so that it's dynamic and you can't just be running around with a bunch of huge subjects. Also, the EIC should have a lot more agency in the game, and currently they just stay with Great Britain for forever. And in this area of nationalism, your subject declaring autonomy could provide the perfect pretense for your worst rival to upset the balance of power. This is also going to be huge, because this means that playing as a subject is going to be a lot more interesting now, because you can look to farm people to help you declare independence, which you couldn't before. We're introducing a number of enhancements to gameplay around managing your subjects, or indeed managing your own status as a subjugated nation, if that's more your speed, which is going to be, Canada runs. These enhancements are meant to directly improve interactivity and AI responsiveness, while introducing a number of quality of life features and highly requested additional mechanics. Some features are available in Sphere of Influence, while others will come to everyone as part of Update 1.7. Okay, so Liberty Desire, which they've reworked, which I think is pretty interesting. The first and most obvious feature you will encounter relating to your subjects in 1.7 is Liberty Desire, a measure of how pressing the issue of autonomy and independence is to the people, particularly the ruling class with the loud cars. In addition to the subjugated nation, at high levels, an AI subject can become rebellious and might even make some terribly rude demands of their overlord. At low levels, they will be complacent and cooperative, enabling their overlord to relax and maybe squeeze them a bit as they please. We do love a good squeeze. For AI countries, Liberty Desire will strongly influence their strategy with respect to their overlord. 4 additional AI strategies have been added, and it's always really cool how these can change dramatically AI behavior. Probably don't pay enough attention to those, but the ones we're going to see are break free. They will attempt to become independent, increase self-reliance. They'll tend to increase their autonomy, maintain autonomy. They want the status quo, and integrate with suzerain. They will want to get closer to integration with their overlord and will comply with their wishes. But Liberty Desire is not just for the AI. It also informs what a human player could do. So if you're playing as a country that's a subject, and the level of liberty can have a direct effect on the country and its pops as well. So it's going to function a bit like legitimacy, where if you have a really, really high liberty desire, you're going to generate radicals. Which is going to be, I guess that'd be an inverse of a legitimacy, but you're going to generate more radicals because people want you to try and break free. The current level of Liberty Desire is visualized much like legitimacy as a tiered meter with different effects at different levels. Unlike legitimacy, is never static. Liberty Desire is always increasing or decreasing. The question is at what speed and what you as an overlord or subject can do about it. Never staying the same. That's crazy. There's no equilibrium. It doesn't exist. And the biggest one I think this is going to be for is, I think that the UK should actually have to do something to maintain control over the EIC, and I'm hoping that this mechanic introduces this. The British East India Company, with its largely self-sufficient economy and powerful standing army, could become a problematic subject for Great Britain unless relations and lobbies are kept in check, and many concessions may have been granted to keep them loyal to the crown. Okay. And we can see here some of the UI. A multitude of factors play into liberty desire, providing you with a lot of different strategies for how you prefer to keep it under control, or perhaps increase it if you're the subject, but not before you want independence. Relations, obviously high relations will lower liberty desire. Relative prestige, the greater the difference in prestige between overlord and subject, the lower the liberty desire. So you can't just stack up a whole bunch of really, really big or middling, size countries as part of your, network of vassals, unless you have a really high prestige. And anything that makes prestige a more useful thing, I'm kind of on board with, because I think it's a stat that's not very useful right now, and it probably should be. The less autonomous your subject is, the greater the prestige difference you need to maintain. To depress liberty desire. Okay, economic dependence and lobbies, explained in greater detail below. Market isolation or supply problems. If you cannot provide your subject with effective access to your market, they will be more inclined to demand sovereignty. Okay, change rate scaling. The higher or lower liberty desire gets, the slower its rate of progression, because it's, progressing towards an equilibrium, giving you more opportunities to manipulate it with diplomatic actions, as we'll discuss soon. Yeah, so the faster it's naturally changing, the less any sort of static modifier to it, or just one hit modifier is going to be, the less useful that's going to be. So, but they don't discuss it in too great of depth. Okay, we have economic dependence. Another metric introduced in patch in update 1.7 is economic dependence, which measures exactly what it sounds like. How dependent country A is on country B's economy. And this one is very interesting because it might encourage you to want to build specific things that aren't just generating you the most money, which is normally how you kind of play now. Economic dependence doesn't do anything directly, but feeds into other metrics such as liberty desire and the cohesion of trade league style power blocks. And so it's important to remember, we're also going to have this for trade league style power blocks, where you're going to want to maybe, overproduce some types of goods just to maintain more cohesion in the power block. A major aspect of economic dependence is how much of the nation's economy is owned by the other country through foreign investments, either directly or through pop investors. If you want to make your subjects more dependent on you, make sure that to provide all of their good jobs. So we can see here there is a total value of economic dependence between Colombia and Great Britain of 1.9. 0.7 of it is coming from Colombia's GDP is owned by Great Britain, and so this gives you incentive to invest in order to sink the hooks in for economic dependence. And then +1 is given to the plus 580% difference in the GDP between Colombia and Great Britain, so having a way bigger GDP. It looks like 1 is probably the ceiling here, would be my guess. A way bigger GDP is going to also give you a really strong modifier, and so you can't just only build in their country, perhaps. And then we have minus 0.3 from unfulfilled goods, Colombia POP's needs satisfied by Great Britain, and minus 0.5 from unfulfilled British POP needs satisfied by Colombia, which they're going to explain below. If you do not share a market with the country, the secondary aspect of economic dependence consists of the value of trade between your two nations, because you don't have to have them in your customs union. But in most cases where economic dependence matters, you do share a market, which introduces another few factors. First of all, the difference in GDP between the countries in the market has an impact, which is a fantastic thing, because before you used to be able to pull Qing into the market, and they did introduce the modifier that would prevent it, but Qing having an absolute enormous economy should make that type of thing harder, and so, or make them want to leave, and they will certainly be less dependent. But this is not that type of relationship anyways. But much more interestingly, how much of your economy provides for the other nation's POPs. So this is incentivizing you to build more consumer goods than is standard in, kind of the current meta. Current meta really encourages you to build resources, and that's mainly because the buildings are just way better in general. And it's still probably the case that you build buildings. However, now there's maybe a reason to overproduce consumer goods, or maybe even stack consumer goods companies and just decide to manufacture at home and then build resources abroad and then ship the resources back, own the resources in other people's country and then build the consumer good manufacturing at home. This is an entirely new strategy that's potentially viable, and it's very interesting that a new way of playing might open up. Now, I think you probably still just blast the resources in your own country, but maybe not. So let's continue. And how much they are able to provide for themselves is a crucial factor. As a market leader, you're considered to be providing anything the market member does not provide for themselves. In this case, luxuries like opium, fruit, luxury clothes, and tobacco. And so you could mainly focus on the manufacturing and maybe even grain. The more you're able to provide for yourself, the more you can offset this factor. Now, the language here is a little bit tricky because I think he switches between referring to yourself as the subject and referring to yourself as the overlord. The more you're able to provide for yourself, the more you can offset this factor. I think that, or maybe you're minimizing a negative modifier, but I think that this is from the perspective of the subject and this is from the perspective of the overlord. I'm not sure exactly. But in this case, Colombia provides most of the grain they consume. So we're from the subject perspective now, which is their dominant demand. As a result, they more than offset the luxuries provided by membership in the British market. However, this is all consumer goods which are providing this modifier. And, okay, I don't know how important this economic dependence modifier is going to be, but if you provide much more consumer goods, it will allow you to, get this modifier swinging the way you want, from either as a subject or an overlord. As a result, from the viewpoint of Great Britain, if I want to increase Colombia's economics dependence on me, again, viewpoint of Great Britain, I should consider producing an excess of the goods that they aren't able to provide for themselves, such as liquor. Thinking longer term, I should also try to take measures to make their domestic staple industries unviable, making me the more dominant supplier of, for example, grain or clothes or furniture throughout the empire, while my colonial subjects' economies consist of producing cash crops for the benefit of the people or the industries. I think that you probably don't want them to produce cash crops. I think you just want them to produce resources. If you make a bunch of wood chops, right, and iron mines in a place that previously had subsistence farms, now they will have a deficit of everything the sub farm is providing or was providing previously. And so in this way, you can, increase demand for consumer goods without actually supplying them through foreign investment. So you foreign invest the resources and then you build the manufactories at home, which is kind of what the UK did to some extent, in regards to, especially early on in the 1800s and the late 1700s, they produced a ton of textiles and basically force exported them to their entire imperial hegemony, or their trade empire type thing, trade empire. And so, okay. And note that this part of the calculation is still work in progress and may be altered for legibility and consistently. We love legibility, big nice, but the principles remain the same, and we can see the consumption dependence, and we see that they domestically fulfill 10K worth of the resources, and they use 6K from Great Britain. Notably, this is going to make anyone who can produce opium a lot better, because you can pull people into your market, you can provide the opium, and they can't provide the opium from themselves. It's also going to make you having a wide variety. I know I rip on tobacco a lot, but having a wide variety of the consumer luxuries in your market overall will be good, because let's say I have Persia in my market and they're producing opium, and they're only producing opium because that's easier. It's more simplified. And then let's say we also have Turkey in the market, and Turkey's only producing tobacco, no opium. Then Persia, if I'm understanding this correctly, Persia is going to have this these amount of goods that are domestically supplied and satisfied by Great Britain. Persia is going to have tobacco needs satisfied by Great Britain, but by Great Britain because it's actually satisfied by Turkey, and Turkey is going to have their opium needs satisfied by Great Britain when it's actually the Persian resources, because it's by the market, I believe, is my understanding, rather than the individual producer themselves. And so if you are having a bunch of different countries from different portions of the empire, and they're each providing each other the goods, which is maybe what he's talking about with the cash crops bit, then maybe that makes it easier to spike this modifier up. Again, I think that this modifier is probably not going to be super important, and so maybe I'm just sweating and overthinking this entire thing, but that there could be really interesting things going on to incentivize you to build in a way that is non-standard, to me is tremendously interesting. But, you probably just still build a bunch of chops because they're OP. Okay. Next, we have lobbies. In the spheres of influence overview, we mentioned lobbies, which are crucial to keeping liberty desire under control across your empire. This part's super cool too. We will go deeper into lobbies next week, big nice, but for now I can mention that the subject nations will almost always have two lobbies relating to their overlord. One of them wanting to be a proponent of close ties with their overlord, while the other is opposed to the overlord and devoted to independence. So now we're going to see the interest groups play a more integral role, in stuff like the geopolitical situation in every subject overlord relationship. The relative power of these lobbies depends on which interest groups support them, and it's going to be curious which interest groups support independence versus buddying up with the overlord. I imagine intelligentsia is going to want the new technology, industrialists will want the investment, and that the more conservative looking groups will prefer independence. How powerful those interest groups are and whether or not they're currently in government. Okay. As an overlord with the sphere of influence expansion, you will have some influence over this by sponsoring the creation and maintenance of lobbies in other countries. Now, this notably does not say in subject countries. It just says other countries, which will be super cool if you can go around meddling in other people's countries in a variety of different ways. I don't know what resource you would spend, but it's very interesting. Maybe Diplo, Diplo is kind of an underutilized resource, so that'd be super good. Diplo or authority. As a subject, you have more direct control. If an interest group supports ties with your overlord, you can try and suppress them, remove them from power, even incite them to revolution, and defeat them to keep your liberty desire high. Though beware, this could rouse your overlord in supporting their side, which is nice to know that now you can support either side of subject revolution, which was not the case before. And so if you have a subject that rebels and you like their laws better than your other subject, you just side with the other guys instead. Or that's what this implies to me. Okay, subject actions. So as a subject, why would you want your liberty desire to be high? Why would you want your liberty desire to be high? Well, that seems intuitive, but you actually probably don't want to keep it high. There we go. Since it can mean less stability in your country, as reflected by the greater risk of radical generation. People demand freedom. Freedom, big nice. But when your liberty desire has reached a high enough level, you can make demands from your overlord, which are hard for them to ignore. So your ability to engage in certain actions are going to depend on this liberty desire, and I'm assuming vice versa. If someone has really high liberty desire, they probably can't plot behind your back. So here we have increase autonomy. You can ask them to increase your autonomy. If they decline, the subject can demand full independence, so the stakes are high. If the request is granted, liberty desire will drop much more manageable levels. But this will be super nice because I think that this will make... If this is semi-consistent, this will actually be really nice for playing as a subject country where you can reduce it to protectorate and still be, a subject of that other guy or gal. Demand state, you can, and this is the ability to trade states more from this DLC seems pretty nice. If your overlord controls a state that is both adjacent or a homeland to you. Now, I object to using both here because now it's unclear. It's both adjacent or a homeland. I think this is either, but either adjacent or homeland. Directly or through another subject, you can demand that they give you a state under certain conditions. Both adjacent, directly, or through another subject. I think you can demand territory off from another subject is what this is saying, based on what we've read through on our first read-through. Okay, request payment relief. You can request that they reduce how much money you're paying, which would be nice if you're playing as a subject country and want to play in this way. Request support for regime, where they're going to give you legitimacy. Request knowledge sharing. They'll give you tech spread boost, which is modest but interesting. And then once these demands have been accepted, your liberty desire will decrease, reflecting the diplomatic impact of the concession your overlord agreed to. There's probably going to be some meta where you give your subjects a whole bunch of stuff so that they have really, really low liberty desire, I'm guessing. Overlord actions. Most of the new options are available for overlords towards their subjects, but follow the same principle. If liberty desire is low enough, you can make a demand from your subject, although this is likely to increase liberty desire and maybe even cause it to increase over time. Similarly, you can grant special privileges to depress liberty desire, like perhaps knowledge sharing. Actually, if we take a look at this, we will be able to see request potential overlord actions, raise subject payments, support regime, knowledge sharing. So it looks like you can do this, but it will be at the cost of some diplo. And then evangelize is definitely an interesting one. We'll get to it in a second. Increase and decrease autonomy. This is pretty self-explanatory. Grant and take state. A much requested feature as an overlord, you can now benevolently decide to grant territory to your subject. Still kind of wish we could give it to someone else as a war goal and have them eat the infamy cost, because this is often the cost of taking a state more than the actual difficulty of winning the war. But this is still something that's nice. The state you select must belong to either you or another one of your subjects, so you can feed one subject with another, and must be adjacent to the subject or a homeland of one of the primary cultures. So this is why we thought it was an either, even though it says both above. In that case, it cannot be a homeland for another subject, and therefore it better fit. Granting a state will, of course, reduce liberty desire, often a substantial amount, especially if it's a homeland. Transferring a state from another subject will, of course, increase their liberty desire, so whoever the state's being taken from, of the subject you transferred it from. In the case of the puppet or vassal subjects, you can even transfer their states to yourself if liberty desire is sufficiently low. I wonder if this is going to give you infamy. If it doesn't, then slowly cannibalizing subjects is going to be probably pretty meta, rather than just eating them in one bite. Is it progress if a cannibal eats with a knife and a fork? Who knows? But maybe this is how you eat your subjects now, instead of just one huge play, if it does mean a lower amount of infamy accrued by doing this, and now you're just playing this liberty to desire kind of minigame. Okay. Exempt from service. For subjects that are forced to join their overlord's diplo play, they don't have to join. Grant their own market. They have their own market different from you. This could be useful in cases where you want to have a subject to be a full trading partner rather than a fully integrated in your economy, limit migration, or reserve your convoys. I'm not sure how many situations where you would want this to be the case, but maybe it matters if they are providing a ton of consumer goods and you want. Well, no, I think grant own market will be probably very uncommon to be used, but maybe we see it. Appoint colonial governor. This lets the overlord select a new head of state for the subject. So this is really interesting because this will be nice for getting certain interest groups in power and forcing them to pass certain laws, although we have more on that in just a second. Also reduce or raise subject payments, pretty self-explanatory. The overlord has the option the overlord has available depends on what laws vis-a-vis and who the subject is. Under some laws, you can permit a local governor to take charge, while under others, only hopefuls from the empire's capital are permitted. Sphere of influence only, singular. Evangelize. Spreads the overlord's religion into the subject, increasing conversion rates. And this is a tremendously interesting one, because to me, this suggests that you could maybe even change your religion, or you can just convert pops and create discriminated pop groups by converting them. I don't really know exactly how that's going to go, but if you can if evangelize allows you to spread your religion in other groups, causing discrimination, such that they want to leave and then migrate to your country, then that's just super nice for you. Already, it seems to be the case that going state religion might be meta now, that mass migration is so strong, and mass migration does not seem to be dependent on if you're the cultural discrimination seems to be only discrimination that matters when it comes to mass migration. Mass migration is a majority of the migration, so it seems to be the case that you just go state religion if you have a decent religion. But the downside of this is it's hard to have the intelligentsia and the religious groups powerful at the same time. And so I'm not sure exactly how that plays out, but okay. I don't know what the meta is. The sample size is too small. A nifty cheat sheet will remind you of the effects of different subject types and compare between them has been added to the Subjects UI tab, where you can also have easy access to liberty desire of your subjects, sort of functions, and a list of the overlord actions you can issue for each subject. If the symbols aren't self-explanatory, they're of course tooltipable. So we see vassal, tributary, puppet, dominion, protectorate, personal union. Personal union being the weird one. And then, if I'm not mistaken, vassal, tributary are the unrecognized overlord type. How much money they're giving you, how much convoys they're giving you, and This is the icon? Or is this independence on ruler death or something? I'm not sure. But okay, let's continue. Support independence. This is super cool. This is a feature at EU4. Support independence is a new diplomatic pact. Big nice. Which a country can establish to commit to support another country's subject if they declare independence from their overlord. Once the diplomatic play has been declared, any supporters will automatically join on the subject's side. As a side effect, this may also increase liberty, desire, progression in the subject. So now Krakow is probably a lot easier to play because you just hit up Prussia and you're like, hey, will you help us out? So over time, supporting a subject's independence may lead to greater autonomy, if not full independence. Supporting the sovereignty of your subjects rivals is a common strategy amongst aspiring imperialists, and subjects of looking to become independent can also cozy up to other nations to ask for their support, hypothetically speaking, of course. Now, this is an interesting one because I think that a common meta that might arise from this is supporting independence in the Dutch East Indies, because the Dutch East Indies, if they break up, they actually have a bunch of states that are really resource dense, other than Java itself, which has a lot of pops, so it's not as resource dense. And if they get released as independent, they often break up, and then you can just eat the pieces much, much easier. And this might be the same for the EIC, where you support their independence so that they get released, so that you can go after the likes of Bengal, which really would open up a whole different type of game. It would be very interesting to see if that's something that you could reasonably do. Okay. Improved imposition of laws. We've introduced the ability to impose laws on your subject in 1.5, but at that time, the implementation was so rudimentary, it was almost like an Easter egg. Yeah, I'm sure some of you are hearing about this for the first time. For those of you who discovered it, in 1.7, you can now impose laws on your subjects directly from the Subjects tab, so in the UI it's a little bit better instead of looking through it the weird way. When you start imposing a law, the other country will get an event that they can respond to the demand. They can choose outright refuse, which they might do if their liberty desire is high, or their chance of passing the law is very low. And you notice here, this seems to indicate, look at all these numbers, these seems to indicate that you can try and pass any law, not just a law, or any law that is potentially passable, but it's not going to be gated behind needing intergroup support. So this is going to be really nice for, opening up people's borders to allow them to have exoduses so that you can pull migrants to your country from whatever subject it is. This is going to be a hugely nice one for that specific reason, I think. They could also choose to start enacting it right away, giving them plus 10% enactment chance for a duration, or deferring it until later. If they are already passing a law at the time you send the demand, they can choose to cancel their current law at no penalty in favor of your request, or wait until the time is right. While they're committing to enacting the law, they cannot cancel it until it's complete. They can, however, abandon the attempt, and may do so if they've made no progress after several years. Okay, and then if you do it as the player, you'll get this event or whatever. In conclusion, other than the happiest of Thursdays, these new interactions with your subjects or your overlord, informed by the diplomatic liberty desire, mechanic, economic dependence system, and lobbies, is meant to add difficulty, depth, and interactivity to your imperialist projects, big nice, or as a subject give you the ability to plan for your eventual independence. I think it's going to be a lot more enjoyable to play as a subject with some of these changes. While most of these mechanics are available in Update 1.7, several of the new interactions are a component of the sphere of influence expansion. Some of the mechanics, such as the imposition of laws and diplomatic actions limited to your countries you have special relationships with. Also, integrate with the power block mechanics in spheres of influence gives you a more unified way of interacting with countries in your sphere, whether they're subjugated or subjugated to you or merely in the same block as you. Okay. They seem to be divorcing being in a customs union from the subject relationship, which currently is a hot bag of mess, because currently they're considered a subject if they're in your customs union, but it's really not the same type of subject. Anyways, these features also add exciting new potentials for more targeted interactions with specific countries without cluttering up the lens interface, or where more generic actions are shown, permitting for more custom interactions between countries to be added in the future. Super nice. Modders should also be able to make good use of the new options we've added to diplomatic actions, such as modifier support. As mentioned earlier, next week is going to be Wiz, who will go into detail on lobbies and what they provide for the upcoming Sphere of Influence expansion. Until then, what? Until then, happy Thursday. So we are going to have just a few more weeks. Just like to remind everyone that the Sphere of Influence is going to be dropping on May 6th, for those of you who don't know, and we're just going to have 4 more Dev Diaries, 4 more Happy Thursdays until that happens. If you liked this rundown, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. We're doing them every Thursday until it comes out. And other than that, have a Happy Thursday.